Do you think that this suspect could strike again, whoever did this?
Well, absolutely. We believe we know why he did this, and we believe that it was targeted. We're not 100% sure of that.
Where is Nancy, and will she ever be found? The breakfast table was a chilling tableau of normalcy. A half-eaten bowl of cereal, a steaming cup of Earl Grey, and Nancy Guthrie's smartphone still plugged into the wall. Outside, the quiet streets of Silver Falls remained undisturbed. Yet inside, the air was heavy with an impossible absence.
This is a local suspect or group of suspects here. It's possible they came from out of town, like out of the area, somehow targeted Nancy.
Nancy hadn't just walked out, she had been extracted in the dark of night, leaving behind a suburban mystery that would dismantle a family and baffle the nation in 2026. The digital blackout and the ghost in the Matrix. The most unsettling detail of the Nancy Guthrie case isn't just that an 84-year-old woman vanished. It's the clinical, high-tech surgicality with which it was executed. Investigators discovered that her home in the upscale Catalina foothills of Tucson, a neighborhood where security is considered a basic utility, was transformed into a digital blind spot in the dead of night. This was no crime of impulse. It was an extraction meticulously planned to defeat the very technology meant to keep Nancy safe. The timeline of the digital breach begins at precisely 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, 2026. This is the moment Nancy's front door camera recorded its final haunting frames. In the grainy, low-light footage released by the FBI, a figure is seen approaching the porch. The suspect is masked, gloved, and moving with a deliberate athletic gait that suggests youth and fitness, a jarring contrast to Nancy's own limited mobility. Before the camera's motion sensor could trigger a full high-definition recording, the figure reached up and manually disconnected the device. This mind-blowing precision suggests the abductor had either scouted the property for weeks or possessed an intimate knowledge of the home's specific security brand and its hardware vulnerabilities. But the blackout didn't stop at Nancy's property line. As the investigation entered its second month in March 2026, a disturbing pattern emerged across the neighborhood. Several residents on the cul-de-sac reported that their own smart home cameras, Ring, Nest, and Arlo systems that typically record 24/7 showed a not available status or a searching for signal error during the exact window of the abduction. Investigators from the FBI's Cyber Division are now exploring the terrifying possibility that the suspect utilized a portable signal jammer. These illegal devices flood specific Wi-Fi and cellular frequencies with white noise, effectively blinding any internet-connected security system within a 50-foot radius. By the time the abductor stepped onto Nancy's porch, the entire street had been plunged into a localized digital vacuum, ensuring that no neighbor's camera would capture a getaway vehicle or a license plate. Furthermore, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos revealed a secondary technical anomaly: a damaged utility box near the entrance of the subdivision. Evidence suggests it was tampered with to disrupt local internet fiber lines shortly before the 1:47 a.m. breach. This level of sophistication shifts the profile of the suspect from a random kidnapper to something much more professional, perhaps even a team. They didn't just hide in the shadows. They manipulated the infrastructure of the neighborhood to make the shadows permanent. As Savannah Guthrie and her family wait for news in the spring of 2026, they are forced to confront the reality that they are up against a ghost in the Matrix who knows how to turn the modern world's surveillance against itself. The shadows moved with purpose, but the electronics went blind first. The pacemaker's heartbeat stopped, and the medico-forensic timeline. In the modern landscape of criminal investigation, the most vital witness isn't always a person. Sometimes, It's a piece of hardware embedded inside the victim's chest. Nancy Guthrie, 84, relied on a sophisticated wireless-enabled pacemaker to regulate her heart rhythm. This device was designed to save her life, but on the night of February 1, 2026, it became a silent narrator for the darkest moments of her disappearance. The data retrieved from Nancy's medical cloud has provided the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department with a heartbeat timeline that is as medically chilling as it is forensic. The data reveals that until 2:28, Nancy's heart was functioning within its normal resting parameters. However, at that exact minute, the device's daily synchronization with her bedside monitor and the health app on her smartphone suddenly and permanently ceased. Because Nancy's phone and Apple Watch were found undisturbed on her kitchen counter the next morning, the loss of connection signifies a physical break in the Bluetooth tether. In the world of medical forensics, this suggests two haunting possibilities. Either Nancy was physically carried out of the 30-foot range of her home by an abductor, or a high-frequency jamming device was utilized to sever the medical transmission. This 41-minute gap between the doorbell camera being cut at 1:47 a.m. and the pacemaker's final ping at 2:28 a.m. has become the focal point of the entire case. Investigators are now obsessively analyzing those 41 minutes, questioning what occurred inside the house that required such a prolonged period of time before the final extraction took place. Adding to the mystery, heart rate data leading up to the disconnect reportedly showed a significant physiological spike. While the FBI has been careful not to release the exact BPM, beats per minute, experts suggest that such an increase in a sedentary 84-year-old at 2:15 a.m. can only be attributed to a massive adrenaline surge, the body's fight-or-flight response. This medical evidence effectively dismantles any theory that Nancy walked away voluntarily or suffered a quiet medical episode. Her heart was reacting to a crisis in real time. In a desperate attempt to find her, the Pima County Sheriff's Department has taken the unprecedented step of utilizing low-flying helicopters equipped with Bluetooth sniffers. These specialized aircraft are designed to scan the desert landscape for the faint 2.4 gigahertz whisper of Nancy's pacemaker, which has an estimated battery life of 6 more years. The case has also sparked a national debate over the Internet of Bodies and the privacy of medical data. Privacy advocates are watching closely as law enforcement uses Nancy's internal medical signals as a tracking beacon, a technique never before seen on this scale in a kidnapping case. For the Guthrie family, the technology is a double-edged sword. It offers the only concrete lead in a case filled with shadows, but it also paints a terrifying picture of Nancy's final moments of distress. As we move deeper into 2026, the pacemaker data remains the most mind-blowing piece of evidence, proving that even when a suspect silences the cameras, they cannot silence the biological rhythm of the person they've taken. In 2026, our own bodies are the most honest witnesses we have left. The blood on the porch, analyzing the crimson signature. The most harrowing physical evidence in the Nancy Guthrie case was discovered within hours of her being reported missing. Small, ominous droplets of blood found on the flagstone porch of her Tucson home. For a case that had already been defined by digital ghosts and silent electronics, this was the first tangible proof that the extraction was not a clean or peaceful event. Forensic experts who have analyzed the scene photos released to the media point to the specific placement and shape of these stains as a mind-blowing indicator of what likely transpired during those final moments at the threshold of her residence. The blood evidence, which DNA testing later confirmed belonged exclusively to Nancy, was not found in large pools that would suggest a fatal injury, but rather in a series of circular, passive drops. In the world of bloodstain pattern analysis, BPA, these types of drops typically fall at a 90-degree angle, indicating that Nancy was likely stationary or moving very slowly when the bleeding occurred. This suggests a struggle that was contained and intimate, perhaps a hand being forced over her mouth, or a blunt force strike meant to incapacitate the 84-year-old before she was moved. Even more telling is the lack of void patterns or large-scale arterial spray. The suspect likely managed to keep the scene relatively tidy, which once again points to a level of calculated control that exceeds the typical behavior of a panicked amateur. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos has been tight-lipped about the exact volume of blood recovered, but forensic insiders suggest that even a small amount is highly significant given Nancy's medical history. At her age, and with her documented mobility issues, any trauma resulting in external bleeding is a high-risk event. This discovery transformed the investigation from a missing person inquiry into a high-stakes felony kidnapping with the potential for aggravated assault. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit has noted that leaving blood at the very entrance of the home, the primary exit and entry point, indicates that the suspect may have been hurried or surprised by Nancy's resistance. It is the one messy element in a crime that was otherwise surgically executed via signal jammers and camera sabotage. Furthermore, the location of the blood, directly on the porch rather than inside the foyer, raises questions about the point of initial contact. If Nancy was taken from her bed, as many initial theories suggested, why was the blood only found outside? This led to the chilling ambush theory, where investigators speculated that Nancy might have been lured to the door, perhaps by a knock or a staged emergency, only to be met by the masked figure captured on the 1:47 a.m. footage. Every drop on that porch represents a second of the struggle, and for the forensics teams, it serves as the most honest witness in a neighborhood where the technology went intentionally blind. As the search enters its second month in March 2026, those crimson stains remain the most visceral reminder of the danger Nancy Guthrie faced when she was forced into the Arizona night. The stains tell a story of a struggle that the neighbors never heard. Scent of a ghost. One of the most polarizing developments in the search for Nancy Guthrie involved the deployment and subsequent withdrawal of specialized K-9 units. Early in the investigation, specifically around the second week of February 2026, the Pima County Sheriff's Department brought in high-level human remains detection dogs, commonly known as cadaver dogs. These animals are trained to identify the microscopic chemical signatures of human decomposition, specifically the compounds putrescine and cadaverine. In a case already fraught with technical glitches and blind cameras, the sensitivity of a dog's nose was seen as the ultimate low-tech solution to a high-tech crime. However, the mind-blowing controversy began when these K-9 units reportedly gave distinct alerts in the meticulously landscaped back garden of Nancy's home. For the Guthrie family and the hundreds of reporters camped outside the Catalina foothills, an alert from a cadaver dog usually signals a tragic conclusion. But when forensic teams used ground-penetrating radar and manual excavation to follow up on these pings, they found nothing. No remains, no discarded clothing, and no disturbed soil that suggested a burial. This led to a wave of speculation. Were the dogs reacting to phantom scents moved by the desert wind, or was the alert triggered by the blood found on the porch being tracked through the yard? By March 11, 2026, Sheriff Chris Nanos made the controversial decision to place the use of cadaver dogs on hold. He explained that the dogs are available if new leads emerge, but for now, the investigation has shifted back to a live rescue mindset. This pivot is significant. Retired police sergeant and National Police Association spokesperson Betsy Brantner Smith noted that pulling back K-9 resources often indicates that authorities believe the victim is still alive and being held elsewhere, possibly moved across the border into Mexico. If Nancy were deceased on the property, the chemical signature would be intensifying, not fading. The decision to stop the K-9 searches was a calculated message to the public. The FBI still believes Nancy is out there, and she is not in that garden. The controversy also highlights the friction between local and federal authorities. Sources within the FBI's Phoenix field office reportedly criticized the early K-9 deployment, suggesting it was premature and may have contaminated other scent trails. Despite this, the pings in the garden remain a haunting footnote. Did the abductor stop in the yard? Was a blood-stained glove dropped and then recovered? While the dogs have been returned to their kennels, the mystery of what they smelled that afternoon continues to fuel true crime forums. In the arid Arizona heat, scent behaves in unpredictable ways. But for a mother whose pacemaker data had already gone cold, the presence of cadaver dogs was a psychological blow that the Guthrie family is still struggling to process. A dog's nose can find the past, even when the present appears empty. The $1 million reward. In the early months of 2026, the national news landscape underwent a seismic shift as one of its own became the headline. Savannah Guthrie, a face synonymous with the morning ritual of millions of Americans, suddenly vanished from the Today Show airwaves. Her absence wasn't for a planned vacation or a special assignment. It was a desperate, high-stakes retreat to her home state of Arizona to spearhead the search for her 84-year-old mother, Nancy. This mind-blowing shift from journalist to the center of a national tragedy has added a layer of profound public grief to an already complex kidnapping case, transforming the investigation into a televised vigil for the entire country. By February 24, 2026, the silence from the abductors had pushed the family to a breaking point. Savannah Guthrie, appearing in a heartbreaking video shared across social media, announced that the family was offering a staggering $1 million reward for information leading to Nancy's safe recovery. This amount, which significantly eclipsed the FBI's initial $200,000 bounty, was a strategic move designed to shake the foundations of the suspect's inner circle. Former law enforcement analysts have noted that a seven-figure sum is often the tipping point for accomplices or associates who may have previously remained loyal out of fear. The Guthrie family didn't just offer money, they offered life-changing wealth in exchange for a single credible lead. The surge in tips following the announcement was immediate, with over 750 high-value calls hitting the FBI tip line within the first 48 hours of the announcement. However, the most emotional moment of the investigation came when Savannah publicly addressed the possibility of a tragic outcome. In a statement that resonated deeply with the public, she admitted that while the family still believes in a miracle, they were prepared for the reality that Nancy may have already gone home to the Lord. This raw admission of potential loss was a rare departure from the typically guarded nature of high-profile families during an active investigation. It signaled to the abductors and the public that the Guthries were no longer just looking for a rescue. They were looking for the truth, regardless of how painful it might be. Savannah's decision to step away from her duties, including the coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics, underscored the gravity of the situation. The media family has also been forced to navigate a minefield of red herring ransom notes. Several communications, including one demanding payment in Bitcoin and another with a bizarrely specific request, have been meticulously analyzed by the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. While some of these messages were dismissed as cruel hoaxes from opportunists, at least two were taken seriously enough to warrant federal tracing. The psychological toll of these deadlines and the lack of a verified proof of life have made the $1 million reward a symbol of the family's last stand against the silence of the Arizona desert. As of March 12, 2026, that reward remains unclaimed, standing as a silent $1 million question mark in a case that has redefined the boundaries between public persona and private pain. A journalist's life is spent asking questions. Now, the family is begging for answers. The mystery of the Ozark Trail Pack and the masked man's profile. In the cold, technical light of the investigation, one of the most specific and mind-blowing clues isn't a high-tech gadget, but a common piece of camping gear. When the FBI released the stabilized doorbell camera footage on February 10, 2026, the public was introduced to a dark, looming figure that had become the primary suspect in Nancy Guthrie's abduction. The individual, described as being approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches with an average athletic build, was seen wearing a very specific item: a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack. This detail is significant because Ozark Trail is a Walmart house brand, making the backpack both ubiquitous and nearly impossible to track through a single purchase. However, the FBI's profiling of this bag has opened a new window into the suspect's potential background and preparation. The 25-liter hiker pack is not just a random bag. It is designed for short-duration, high-intensity movement, precisely what the 41-minute window between the 1:47 a.m. camera disconnection and the 2:28 pacemaker signal loss would require. Behavioral analysts suggest that the choice of this specific gear points to someone who is practical and likely familiar with the Tucson area's rugged desert terrain. The pack is large enough to carry kidnapping kit essentials, restraints, a signal jammer, and medical supplies, but small enough to allow for a quick, silent exit through the rocky Catalina foothills. The FBI has reportedly been canvassing Walmart locations across the Southwest, reviewing months of purchase history and security footage in hopes of finding the masked man buying this specific bag without a mask. But the backpack wasn't the only piece of the suspect's uniform that has baffled the public. On February 15th, a couple living 2 miles from Nancy's home discovered a pair of work gloves discarded near a hiking trailhead. Initial hopes were astronomical. If these gloves belonged to the suspect, they could hold the touch DNA needed to solve the case. While the Pima County Sheriff's Department eventually confirmed the DNA on those specific gloves belonged to a local restaurant worker, the event highlighted a terrifying reality. The suspect in the video was seen wearing similar gloves to ensure they left 0 fingerprints behind. This level of forensic awareness, covering the face, the hands, and using a common retail brand for gear, suggests a suspect who isn't just an intruder, but a student of the game who understands how to avoid modern forensic traps. The Ozark Trail lead has also fueled a massive citizen detective movement. Online forums have been flooded with photos of hikers in the Tucson area carrying the same pack, leading to several cases of mistaken identity and harassment of innocent locals. Savannah Guthrie herself has had to walk a fine line, urging the public to stay vigilant while warning against the TikTok detective culture that has accused family, friends, and neighbors based on the backpack alone. As the search for Nancy Guthrie enters its 2nd month in March 2026, the black backpack remains a symbol of the suspect's anonymity. It is a common object carried by a ghost, a piece of everyday gear that facilitated one of the most sophisticated abductions in recent American history. Common objects become terrifying when they are carried by ghosts. The signal jamming theory and the neighbor's Wi-Fi glitch. In the early weeks of March 2026, As the search for Nancy Guthrie crossed its 40th day, a new and technically sophisticated lead began to circulate through the neighborhood of Catalina Foothills. Investigative journalist Brian Enton of News Nation was among the first to report a mind-blowing anomaly that suggested the suspect was not merely a physical presence on the property, but a digital ghost capable of manipulating the local network infrastructure. Several neighbors, residing within a 2-mile radius of Nancy's home on East Skyline Drive, reported that their own security systems had experienced unprecedented glitches during the exact window of the abduction. This has led the FBI and Pima County Sheriff's Department to pivot toward a theory involving the use of illegal signal jammers. The evidence for this theory is both startling and specific. One couple, whose property is directly adjacent to Nancy's, discovered that while 3 of their 4 Ring cameras operated normally throughout the night of February 1st, the one camera with a direct line of sight to the Guthrie residence suddenly displayed a not available status during the critical early morning hours. They noted to reporters that they had never encountered such an error message in the years they had owned the system. Experts in cybersecurity explained that Wi-Fi jammers work by flooding the 2.4 GHz or 5 GHz radio frequencies with noise, preventing smart cameras from communicating with the home's router or uploading footage to the cloud. By strategically deploying a jammer, the abductor could have created a cone of silence around Nancy's home, ensuring that even if neighbors had high-end surveillance, they would record nothing but a black screen. On March 5, 2026, federal agents were seen returning to the neighborhood, this time going door to door, not just to ask for sightings, but to specifically inquire about the residents' internet connectivity. Homeowners confirmed that investigators were asking if they had noticed any flickering in their smart lights, drops in streaming quality, or complete Wi-Fi outages between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. on the night Nancy vanished. This line of questioning indicates that authorities are no longer treating the camera disconnection at Nancy's front door as an isolated manual act of vandalism. Instead, they are looking for evidence of a technical perimeter established by the suspect. If a jammer was indeed used, it suggests a level of premeditation and technical proficiency that characterizes a professional or highly organized individual, rather than a common burglar who stumbled into a kidnapping. The implications of this signal jamming theory have sent shockwaves through the true crime community and the security industry alike. It exposes a terrifying vulnerability in the modern connected home. Our reliance on wireless signals can be turned into a weapon by a savvy predator. For the Guthrie family, this detail adds to the growing profile of a suspect who was invisible by design. They didn't just hide behind a mask, they hid behind the very airwaves the neighborhood used to feel safe. As of today, March 12, 2026, the FBI has not officially confirmed the recovery of a jamming device, but the not available status on local servers remains one of the most chilling digital signatures of the case. It is a reminder that in the Tucson desert, the most dangerous things aren't always what you can see, but what you are intentionally prevented from seeing. We live in a world of constant watching until someone turns off the lights. The road ahead, future investigations, and the family's resolve. As the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance moves deeper into the spring of 2026, the focus has shifted from the initial shock of the crime scene to a long-game strategy of high-tech surveillance and genealogical persistence. While the physical search of the desert washes and canyons near Tucson has been scaled back, the digital hunt is only just beginning. The FBI has confirmed that they are now employing a technique known as investigative genetic genealogy, IgG, to analyze the foreign DNA found inside Nancy's home, DNA that does not match her family, her close associates, or any profile currently listed in the National CODIS database. By uploading this genetic signature to public databases like GEDmatch, forensic genealogists are currently working backward through family trees to identify distant relatives of the suspect, a process that has famously cracked cold cases decades old but is being used here in near real time. Simultaneously, the Pima County Sheriff's Department has announced a transition in their future investigation phase, focusing heavily on the damaged utility box and neighborhood infrastructure. Authorities are working with telecommunications giants to trace the origin of the signal jamming equipment that blinded the neighborhood's cameras. There is a growing belief among experts that the suspect may have left a digital fingerprint when purchasing or testing this specialized gear. Furthermore, the Guthrie family's home, which was released from its status as a crime scene on February 21st, is no longer a silent tomb. It has become a headquarters for the million-dollar reward effort. Savannah Guthrie and her siblings, Annie and Cameron, have made it clear that their plan ahead involves a relentless media campaign to ensure Nancy's face remains on every screen in America until she is found. Savannah's personal path forward has also become a subject of national conversation. After stepping down from her high-profile role at the 2026 Winter Olympics to remain in Arizona, she has transitioned into a role of lead advocate for her mother. The family has recently discussed the establishment of a Nancy Guthrie Foundation, which would focus on the safety of vulnerable seniors and the implementation of Nancy's Law, proposed legislation that would mandate enhanced security and GPS tracking options for medical devices like pacemakers. By turning their private agony into a public cause, the Guthries are ensuring that even as the news cycle moves on, the resources dedicated to finding Nancy do not. They are preparing for a marathon, not a sprint, with plans to fund private investigators and specialized K-9 teams if the official federal resources ever begin to wane. The most mind-blowing aspect of the family's future plan is their direct engagement with the dark corners of the internet. They have reportedly hired a team of private cyber intelligence analysts to monitor the dark web for any mention of the ransom demands or the specific Bitcoin addresses linked to the early unverified communications. While the FBI remains the primary investigative body, the Guthrie family's willingness to use their own significant resources to bypass traditional bureaucratic hurdles shows a modern approach to a missing persons case. For the family, the road ahead is paved with a singular, unwavering objective. As Savannah recently noted in an emotional update to her followers, "We are not just waiting for news, we are hunting for it." In the quiet of the Arizona night, the search for Nancy Guthrie continues, fueled by a unique blend of 21st-century science and an ancient, unbreakable family bond. Silence is only temporary when a family refuses to stop calling your name. As the million-dollar reward stands unclaimed and the FBI continues to sift through thousands of tips, the Tucson desert holds its secrets close. Whether this case ends in a miraculous reunion or remains an impossible enigma, it has forever changed how we view suburban security and the digital footprints we leave behind. For Savannah Guthrie and her family, the breakfast table remains a place of memory and hope, a silent reminder that the search for the truth and for Nancy will never truly be over. Where do you think Nancy is? Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Next time we talk about Nancy, we hope she has been found.